All right, so our second speaker for tonight is Jan Gary. She'll be discussing her senior exhibition, Maury, which explores the effects that human society has had on the flora and fauna in the Rocky Mountain region. Following graduation, Jan plans to pursue work at private art galleries in the Southwest. Please welcome Jan.
Thank y'all. Thank you. This is a lot more people than I thought it was going to be. Again, just thank y'all for coming out and supporting us. Like, this is huge and crazy. Okay. Well, a little bit about the name. I'll just start off with that. So Maury, I kind of tied it to the concept in art called memento mori, which means remember that you will one day die. And it's a recurring theme throughout art. And I wanted it to be about just the effects. Goodness me. I'm looking at my mom and she's getting all teary-eyed and I'm like, oh God. So it's the nature, it's getting to me. But I tied it from memento mori, remember you will die. But I wanted it to just be Maury because it's something that is actively happening out in the Rockies and basically everywhere. The tundra and the mountainscapes, they're such fragile places and they're very susceptible to, to the animals, the plants and the animals dealing with extinction and risks of endangerment. So I just really wanted to discuss that. The hearts, there are 48 hearts. I have little maps on the outside, and it starts over here on this wall with this top left corner, and it goes from 1 to 12, and then from there it goes, and then it goes over onto this wall. I have everything from a rufous hummingbird to a buffalo. I really wanted to try and include as many animals as I possibly could, ranging from like fish and birds to larger mammals and the smaller ones. The reason why I also included some prairie animals like the buffalo and the antelope is because they're still affected by the fires that happen that may start in the mountains, but then those end up traveling down. They have a lot of issues of fires around the Boulder area, and I really wanted to discuss that. The buffalo, they're also known as ecologically extinct, meaning they can no longer live out in the wild. They're raised domestically. And all of that was because they were overhunted and poached and used for money and profit. Let's see, what else is there? The drawings in the back, I did those on Mylar, which is a translucent plastic. And I drew them with charcoal. And as you know, charcoal is a byproduct of like burnt plant material. And, I wanted to include plants that, more like grassy plants in like the grassy areas of the mountains, because those are the most susceptible to fire damage, I'd say. And then I have columbines in the middle because those are the Colorado state flower. And then these 4 little pieces on the sides, the collages, they each kind of tell a little story, starting with this little one. In Latin, it's called Humble Beginnings. And then from there, I have the cicada wings, which I'll get onto that a little bit later. And then I have this one, which is about metamorphosis, and the process of changing and, the changing of the seasons and the introduction of the different fire seasons. And then I have my little raccoon skull that I got from my backyard about 12 years ago, whenever we moved here. And that one is about decay and, just like the after effects. Okay, and then the big one. So this one has a lot of different materials all throughout it. It was quite the process. Let's see here. So it's got different sands and gravels from really all over the West, but mostly New Mexico and parts of Colorado. A lot of the red came from the deserts in New Mexico. The sand came from Hobby Lobby, but we don't have to talk about that. And then I also have the red clay, dried red clay from here in my parents' backyard. So the little darker bits, I kind of wanted those to represent the burn scars from after the fires. So the first summer I worked up in Estes Park, which is where my mom is from. That's my mom's hometown. The next fall, so a couple months after I got back, there were 2 massive fires that started. It was the Cameron Peak Fire and the East Troublesome Fire. and it burned down almost 300,000 acres, if not a little bit more. The East Troublesome fire started on the western side of the range, but it ended up going over the Continental Divide, and it started affecting the backside of Estes Park, while the Cameron Peak fire was around Fort Collins and Boulder, and that started coming up from the other side. So basically, my mom's little mountain town was just surrounded by fire. Goodness me. Yeah, so it was just really scary because we knew a lot of people. Goodness. We knew a lot of people who ended up having to evacuate, and we just didn't know if, we were just going to lose everything. I was not expecting to do this tonight. So the gold in this one, I really wanted to try and capture the really crazy haziness that happens from the smoke that blows in. The second summer I was working up there, my boyfriend and I, Seth, we experienced a lot of the haze from fires that were happening out in Utah. And so this haze was blowing in, and it was just very eerie. His parents came in and they got to see it, but everything just has this red glow. And it's both kind of beautiful. It's kind of like, ooh, golden hour pictures. It's so pretty. But then, it really starts to hurt your throat and it gets into your lungs, and it's just very uncomfortable. It's very unsettling. But the dark bits, now that I can get back to that, the dark bits, if you get up close, you can kind of see, I try to create like different layers throughout it. It kind of looks like the age of a tree, because so many trees end up getting burnt down. And then the little rivers throughout it. So after the fires, they have a lot of issues with flooding. And I got the sediment from the Big Thompson Canyon, which experiences a lot of a lot of flood damage. They have these giant gates there because they have so many issues with it, and the roads always get wiped out. So I wanted to kind of include little notions of that. Also, turns out, so the black powder pigment that I was using for this, the main ingredient was charred animal bone, and I did not realize that until I was like halfway done using it. And I was like, oh, that's really gross, but also really fitting, so how convenient. And then these little bits, it's kind of that also has the sediment from the Big Thompson Canyon. But I kind of wanted that to kind of encapsulate the tundras melting, because being there from the start of the summer in May until August, you get to see the complete changes on the mountain faces and how the slopes kind of change. And the second summer I was up there, of course it was right whenever my mom came up there. She's like, oh, I get to go up where it's all nice and cool and doesn't get above like 80. Well, it got up to the 90s and it hadn't been that hot in forever. And well, there's no air conditioning up there, so that kind of sucked. But so I just really wanted to have this painting say a lot. I've had someone say that my show is like beautifully apocalyptic, and I'm like, cool. And with that, so the cicadas, they kind of became a statement for my show, and also kind of for me. They kind of became a little symbol, because they live underground for like 17, 18 years. They just live in this little dormant state, and then they come out and they live for such short times. And I wanted it to kind of be a discussion of dormancy and how these issues seem like they're not really happening in the current. But then, people are talking about in 15 years, it's in 15 years, and 20 years, and 50 years. But it's something that is happening now, like it's no longer a dormant thing. And so I wanted to have a little cicada that's out singing his song, letting people know that this is something happening in the now. But I think that's really all I have to say. Do y'all have any questions? Remy.
Can you talk about how you acquired all of the little cicada wings and all the little dead things?
Well, I had these people, and I called them my bug plugs, because I would always send out little messages. I'm like, hey guys, if y'all see a cicada on the ground, save it for me. I need its wings. I had a giant pile of them on my desk. I'm sure my roommate Natalie absolutely loved me for that.
So awesome.
Yeah, just all the dead bugs. The entomology program at LSUS, I ended up befriending a guy who's a student there, and he messaged me, and he was like, hey, so the entomology department is trying to throw away all of these butterfly wings. And I was like, no, I'm gonna take those. And so I don't even know how many butterflies, Like this is only like a small fraction of what I got from the entomology department. So I'm very thankful for them. But some of those butterflies are like from the 70s. And it's just really crazy that I'm able to work with him. He was even like, yeah, I'm sure some of these might even be extinct. I don't know. And I even had some monarchs, which you know are an endangered species. And so you'll see like little monarch wings throughout that. And I did my research. All of these butterflies do migrate through Colorado. So I did want to have that in there. Yeah, any other questions? Nick.
So what inspired you to choose this color palette you've gone with?
Funny you should ask. Well, I'm a silver girl. I wear a lot of silver. Wanted to kind of change it up a little. No, I just really love the way that it reflects. Also, gold is used in a lot of funerary practices throughout different cultures. And, you know, it's kind of almost like a bit of like a funeral for these animals. But I really wanted it to be something that people could literally reflect on. I mean, you could walk up close enough, you can see your reflection in it and playing with the shadows. You know, and it kind of shows that direct correlation between you and the effects you may have on the animals and the plants. Again, like with this big one, I really wanted to kind of have like that hazy nature, but also really beautiful. And again, the gold just reflects back on you. Yeah. Miss Lepore.
What are the hearts made of?
Terracotta clay, and they are not fired. So be careful with them. Don't go knocking on them or anything.
So how are they mounted? Because the larger ones must be pretty heavy.
Yes, especially the buffalo one. I just have this vision of it just like crashing down while I'm up here talking and be like, I did that on purpose. It's fragile. I used epoxy for the larger ones, and then for like the little teeny tiny ones, I just used like regular, like neutral pH glue. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Natalie.
So speaking of the hearts, can you take us through some of the different kinds of animal hearts that you have, and like specifically why you picked some of them?
For
Maybe,
sure.
Like one that you really like.
I really love my grizzly bear heart. It's that big one because it's like the only one where I could get a really great reference photo, which by the way is disgusting. Yeah, it's the larger one on that second row right there with all the different ventricles and like the different arteries coming out of it. I was very happy with how that one came out because it's pretty exact. I'm really happy with my buffalo one, and I also really like that one because the Latin name for a bison is bison bison. And I'm like, wow, what are the odds of that? There's also a trout. It's one of the little, it's like a little triangle. It's kind of like on its side, and the little arteries go out that way. Yeah, it's like one of those ones, but it's actually an endangered fish, and it's called the greenback cutthroat trout. And I'm like, wow, what a name for a little fish, you know? And then my friend Anna Jane's been joking around saying I'm in my cutthroat era, so I'm like really resonating with that fish. And so, yeah, that's what I'd say. Anyone else? Anna Jane.
Okay, so there are a lot of rectangles for a show about such organic material, and why did you decide to hang it in an almost like manufactured way for a show about the environment?
Well, I'd say it's because there's such a variety of sizes and different kinds of animals. I really just needed one very consistent thing, and I think that having like consistently sized like squares really helps put an emphasis on the size of the hearts, because then you can really see like, oh, this is what the little tiny hummingbird one looks like on one of these squares, but the square is almost completely covered up with the bison hearts. So it's just like that little variation there. Ethan.
Butterfly wings are really, really delicate and really breakable. So
Yeah.
how did you get them so perfectly blown out and just very pretty looking and staying where it
Thank
is,
you.
like not falling apart?
Well, a lot of frustration, a lot of Q-tips, some really good tweezers, and hot glue guns, because then I don't have to sit there and wait for it to dry for like 10 minutes. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Calvin.
I love the way that you use the found materials, like all the way down to just getting dirt from traveling to the Southwest and Colorado. If you could pick anywhere else in the world to do a similar show, like off the top of your head, where would you want to go get some dirt?
Well, I'm always collecting dirt. You can ask my parents. Like, I just always had a plethora of dead bugs and dirt in different containers. But probably I'd want to do the coastal regions here in the South, because I think that dirt, compared to this, it would be so rich and dark and fertile. And it's also an area that has a lot of issues with, like the possibility of like an oil spill or something. And then also with rising ocean levels, you end up losing land there. Any other questions? Yes?
What kind of material did you use for the gold?
So there's this wonderful gold leaf you can buy off of Amazon. I got about like 600 sheets for $20, so it worked out pretty well. Yeah. Any other questions?
Can you talk about your research process for the hearts?
Well, I started off by looking up the extinct and endangered animals in the different regions. The gray wolf that I have, which is right next to the grizzly bear heart, so that animal has gone extinct in like the Colorado regions of the Rockies, but whenever you go further up north, like into Montana and Canada, they're present. I think even maybe Wyoming, but I'm not too sure about there. But so it started off with that. It's the Wolverine greenback cutthroat trout. Let's see here, the Mexican spotted owl, and then I think there's another fish. I think it's the mottled sculpin. I think they're all on the endangered list for the National Park Service. And then from there, went on the great task of trying to figure out how big these hearts were, and I was like, for sure Google will have the answers for me, and Google did not have the answers for me. So it really started off like, say like if I found like one squirrel's heart size, but I couldn't find another rodent, I'm like, well, they're in the same genus, so like, or like same species or whatever. I was like, I could just like figure out how to do some math. So it was like, here's how big the heart is compared to the rest of the animal, and then here's how big this heart, how much smaller this animal is to this one, so I'd guess the heart would be that much bigger. Yeah, it was a process. And it was really gross looking at the reference photos, especially for like the big game, because it's all like recipes. Recipes are a great place to figure out how big an elk heart is. So there was that. Any other questions? Yes?
You're not going to get out of this without
No.
asking you a question.
This is true. This is very true.
Which one of these hearts most closely matches the dimensions of a human heart?
That is a great question. I would say, I cannot remember what animal it is, but it's on that wall. I think it's the, gosh darn it, Dad. Probably the gray wolf one, because like they're relatively large. Like I'd say like if a wolf were to be attacking me, it would be about the same size as me. So I would go with that. But yeah. Yeah, but I'd say the gray wolf. I think it's right next to the grizzly bear. Yes, that one. Yep. Yes.
So what guided your choice of ordering the hearts?
So they are in alphabetical order by their known name. So I think it starts with the Abert squirrel and ends with the Wolverine. So it's in alphabetical order for y'all's ease of enjoyment. So any other questions? Rebecca.
So all your pieces have gold like throughout them except for the ones in the back. Is there a specific reason for that?
I just really love drawing on Mylar. And if you get up close enough, some of the frames will have gold specks on it. Sorry about that. I'm constantly covered in gold. It's just a thing now. I did do this on purpose on my face though. But I'd say I probably did that because I really wanted to capture how delicate the plants are, and that's really hard to do on gold because these are so, I wouldn't say harsh, but they're much more prominent than those are, and I really wanted those to kind of almost look like a whisper on an image. So, yeah. Any other questions? Is that all, everything? All right. Well, thank y'all.